The threat of capitalism and of democracy.
It used to be that countries were considered superpowers. Now what we see is that it's corporations, transnational corporations.
If we look who is behind, let's say, U.S. public policy, it's Wall Street.
I have a theory. I always said there are no more superpowers but supermarkets in the world. The one that controls the market controls.
Regime changes, transnational corporations, and 9/11, how are these connected?
The IMF and the World Bank started to perform a new role, which was that of exerting control over these highly indebted countries and essentially establishing an alternative parallel government to the national government of these countries.
Behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people.
The problem is globalization has gone so fast that we lack the structures to provide adequate regulation around it.
The elite of the elite would be running the world, in effect. The investment bankers are my invisible government. The real powers behind the throne. That combines those two things. You know, what makes the world go around? It ain't love, it's money and power.
When a government is dependent on bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain.
I think the end is the execution of American financial power wherever it decides to take it and exercise that power in the world.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order.
There was something called the Project for a New American Century that actually was a position paper by some neoconservatives in government outlining what they would like to see as kind of the future role of the United States, which was basically to dominate the rest of the world economically, militarily, culturally. But they needed to have some change take place before that was possible, and that change might only be possible if it were precipitated by some catastrophe such as Pearl Harbor. Considering these people were major players in government at the time, one can certainly see where 9/11 would work to their advantage.
Are you happy with the official story about 9/11?
The vast majority of Americans, unfortunately, buy the mainstream media version, which always turns out later to have been a crock of lies, usually fed by government officials.
I'm standing outside D.H. Griffin Wrecking Company, based in Greensboro, North Carolina, which was chosen by the DDC as the consultant in charge of all demolition operations at the World Trade Center site following the 9/11 disaster. The company response team oversaw and approved all demolition activities associated with the cleanup project. Weeks Marine Incorporated, the Cranford, New Jersey corporation, was the firm responsible for offloading by barge from Manhattan more than 1.2 million tons of structural steel and other debris. No one from FEMA would talk with me, so I tried for over a year to interview David Griffin Jr. to find out if he could shed light on rumors of detonation caps being found in the debris, or if he knew why the steel was removed before a thorough forensic analysis took place. All attempts to schedule an interview were rejected with no explanation.
It's all fakery. Arab hijackers didn't do all this. It was an inside job. It was our own elements of our own government.
According to recent polls, about a third of the population believes that the Bush administration was responsible for 9/11. Either they directly arranged it or they made sure it would happen. But what's particularly striking is that, and tells you something about American democracy, is that this huge number of people thinks that the government is run by mass murderers who are purposely murdering Americans and doesn't think they can do anything about it.
That goes along with the PNAC, Project for a New American Century. It would take some sort of major disaster to cause the fear among people, who would then in turn give the government liberties that they wouldn't otherwise give them, give up their own liberties that they wouldn't otherwise give up, and allow the government to take actions that they wouldn't otherwise agree with the government taking in order to put that plan in motion.
The 9/11 attack on U.S. soil created fear, frustration, resentment, and retaliatory strikes against Afghanistan, and with subsequent preemptive strikes against Iraq.
Osama bin Laden's been dead since 18th of December 2001. He was at the Battle of Tora Bora. There was an American team that made its way there. There were 2 Afghan militias holding the Arabs, the foreign fighters, in that big, long defensive position at Torgar Mountain. Took several days, realizing that bin Laden was there, and eventually got an airstrike in late in the afternoon when he would come out of his cave to communicate by radio to his fighters. And he was bombed. If he survived the initial one, he didn't survive the night. The pounding on that mountain sealed off the caves that the survivors had gone back into. They collapsed. And he has never been credibly seen or heard from since. One of the members of the team who brought that about came to see me. And then he told me his story. And a book is coming out about that.
There is no doubt that we've gotten a military, industrial, university, congressional complex of interlocking interests that are then, maybe it includes also the world of journalism, which is actually turned into the Ministry of Propaganda, who provides the rationale for how we are still an exceptional country.
The media is slower than Congress in finding its backbone. We may be in the age that the independent media has gone the way of the buffalo. If we do, it's a great danger to our republic.
There's a deeply ingrained imperial mentality which almost has a compelling effect on accepting the nobility of the state, whatever it's doing. Actually, there's even a name for it. It's called American exceptionalism.
We're all brainwashed, psyoped into, we're so good. It's American exceptionalism, it's termed, right? We're the only nation that's great in world history. We can do no wrong. We're always the good guys, and our government is too. Isn't that? It's been called the Disneyfication of history.
One of the main obstacles to making an impression upon the American mind about U.S. foreign policy, the main obstacle to changing their views about U.S. foreign policy is that they hold a very basic and deep-seated belief that no matter what the U.S. government does abroad, no matter how bad it may look, the government means well, that their intentions are honorable. They may lie on occasion, they may blunder, they may on occasion do more harm than good, but this basic belief teaches Americans that the intentions are noble. If you hold that basic belief, it's very difficult to accept the idea that the U.S. government in Iraq, for example, is doing something which they shouldn't do, because the intentions are good. If you accept the intentions, you tend to support the policy. Even if the policy seems to be failing, the policy itself is not questioned. And it's very difficult to change people's minds about that. They have been raised to believe this, that starting certainly with the Second World War, which we call the Good War, since then, all our interventions have been for good purposes. We have been fighting an evil called communism, and now an evil called terrorism. We have overthrown dictatorships. This is all part of the mythology.
What my rule is if the corporate media and the government tell you something and it's controversial, the government and the corporate media are lying. It's Reynolds' rule. If it's controversial, the mainstream is wrong.